Let's continue the conversation on teenage pregnancy. Now we're joined in studio by Mpadi Makgalo, Hill SA CEO. Very good evening to you, Mpadi. Thanks very much for your time. In sheer numbers terms,
yes,
it would seem that we are not out of sync, yes, with the rest of the continent,
yes,
and at major parts,
yes,
of the world, but we are in the high bad situation,
yes,
in any case.
Yes, that is very true, and that's very concerning because we recycle this. During COVID, we had this scourge whereby in Gauteng we had very high teenage pregnancy rates, and we talked about it. And fast forward 3 years later or 4 years later, we're still here. And I think for me, it talks to the solutions that we currently are working on, and we need to question that to say, are we on the right path? Because we can't continue on the same path, and maybe the conversation or deeper conversation needs to be had in terms of what is it that we're not talking about it, and how is it that we can engage in a way that we can see these rates and these statistics changing and being different. Yeah.
Are you able to answer that question? What is it?
And I think it's a myriad of issues. I think one of the things that from this UKZN study that came out, they are personal issues where young girls are feeling, I'm not feeling loved, and being in a relationship with somebody which, tend to lead to sex. That becomes an issue, and we're still having the sugar daddy syndrome, where young girls are still, engaging with older men, and the power dynamics doesn't really allow them to have
negotiate.
Exactly, to negotiate sex and how they want to have it and all of that, and peer pressure. The study showed that, most of these teenage pregnancy, it was their first or second debut. So it was not something that they were having on a regular basis, and then pregnancy happened. So it was, curiosity of like what this could be. And I think for me, it talks to the fact that we're not having enough sex education in our home, in our schools, and in the community. And I think for me, that needs to be on the table. And I think given our stigma and our cultural beliefs, when do we have this conversation? And I think we wait till late. And I think it talks to the need for us to have this conversation earlier on. And most households, that's not the case.
I mean, in a country with such high poverty and unemployment, yes, high unemployment rates, it can be easy.
It can be. It can be
to have very, conversations of that nature, because these other factors,
exactly,
that stand in a way of actual, real conversations.
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, economic is a very big one. And I think it then talks to what happens to the family. We always refer to our parents having the right conversation, but our parents in the home. Are we talking about, because of the economic situation that we are, it then affects the family. We have a breakdown in families. And so there isn't, we have this solution that we always, use to say, families should have this conversation, but our mothers and fathers in the home and able to have this conversation. And that for me is one of the areas where we tend to go there, but is it possible? Is it happening? How many, children wake up with a mom and a dad in the house and have those conversations? And if there is a mom in the house, how present is she? Because she's also pressed, with other things. You spoke about economic issues. She's also dealing with her own mental health issues. I mean, we're just not having the conversation in the home.
Well, I'm trying to think. Going back to my younger years, yes, I was brought up by my grandparents. They had a view about dice, for example,
yes,
which they condemned because,
yes,
it was gambling,
yes,
and all of that. But the minute I started playing dice and started bringing money to, yes, home, that conversation died.
And I think the same applies with young women dating older gentlemen, that we have moral, what do you call it, stance in terms of that. But when the money comes in, do we question when the money is coming in? You know, where is the money coming in? How is a 14-year-old, 15-year-old able to buy certain clothes, certain goods, and also contributes towards the home? And I think that's the conversation we're not having, and the honesty to say, actually, we are in a crisis here. And I think for me, teenage pregnancy, it's a symptom to something that's happening in our society that we're not talking about, you know, and it's a breakdown of the family and a breakdown of communities, and not having the conversation, and just not being honest enough to say, maybe we need to go back to the drawing book and figure out that in what's happening in this society, what would be the best ways to tackle this issue.
In the age of social media,
yes.
I mean, people post and
yes.
boast about having a nice life.
Yes.
Drinking expensive champagne, yes. being at all the fun
yes.
Places. I'm wondering about the contribution,
yeah.
you know, of that
yes.
in actually fueling what we actually see, because we see people sort of glorifying these yes. nice yes. lifestyles and wanting to be seen to be exactly. having a nicer life,
exactly.
you know, than the girl next door or your friend.
Exactly. And I think for me, we think that this is a calculated, like, you know, young girls get into this knowing what the end result is. So I think when you talk to about social media and having that, you know, liking or wanting and desires to have this, and not really understanding what it would mean for you to get these things, and in most instances, it becomes transactional to say an older man will come in and give you those things, but there's a cost to pay, and there's, you know, we spoke about not having the power to then negotiate sex and so forth. So it's for me, it's at 13, I mean, what did we know at 13? Like, in terms of how do I talk to, even if it's somebody my age, about sex? I mean, I don't even have the tools to really, I don't even know my body, let alone have the emotional capacity to then be able to say, you know, now I'm doing this, and it could lead to that. So it's someone, you know, yeah, it becomes very confusing for a young person to navigate that space. And we, at Heal SA, we end up getting the end of this story, where now I'm pregnant, you know, and usually they wait till very late, where, you know, they can't even talk about termination because it's 5-6 months later, you're hoping it'll disappear. You know, your peers are also advising you of what could happen. You've tried several things and they didn't work, and now the reality is set in and you are now pregnant, and what do I do now?
But what about the pressures from whether it's this boyfriend or the sugar daddy? Who say,
I mean, the pressure,
you're not going to terminate.
There. Of course.
I want that baby.
Of course. And I think also what we don't talk about is that, you know, there's also the fear that if I terminate, then, you know, issues about infertility, you know, would I be able to have another child? So you are now stuck in that. And also our cultural beliefs. We still believe that, you know, you need to keep the baby, you're pregnant, and you have to continue with that. But I mean, I think for me, it's going back to the 14-year-old and their mental capacity and being able to, how do they navigate that? And remember, once you get pregnant in your community, there are repercussions. You're now seen as this bad girl that, you know, has done some bad things, and the boy is out of the picture. So you carry the burden.
And you drop out of school.
Of course.
Often never to return.
Of course. And remember, you are now, you know, you are a child, you're now transitioning into an adult. And there's a lot of hormonal, you know, instability. And now that the pregnancy comes in, you're compounded the issue now. So issues of suicide ideation, worthlessness, and difficulty, you know, navigating the space.
And often, apparently, close to 1 in 5
yes.
Of these young women also have HIV.
Of course. And my background is in HIV, and I mean, I'm very much privy to this the landscape of HIV and AIDS. And I think for me, it's a lot for a young person to deal with. And not only that, but it's, your dreams are being deferred. As a young girl, you had dreams of being a doctor, an advocate, maybe running your own business. Now everything has to be put on hold so that, everybody now has to figure out how to help you and deal with the new reality of a baby.
And what do, numbers tell us about those who are able to sort of, regain control, of their lives? Do we know how successful they become, or what that period they would have gone through actually does to them as they become more mature adults?
Yes. What I know for a fact, I don't have the numbers, but what I know for a fact in terms of the research is that family support goes a long way in terms of assisting or helping someone or young girl who's going through this to be successful later in life. So how my mother would then, embrace me has a lot to do with the fact that I would then go back to school. I would then be able to pursue life like, any other young person. Of course, notwithstanding that, we do have this little child in the house, but family support is key in terms of a young girl growing up to be successful and pursuing their dreams and being a vital member of society.
And I'm asking that question because there are people who say, or think that even though they may be able to, some are able to sort of regain their lives, and become successful. But what they learned during that period, what they were going through, sort of hardens some of their attitudes to a point where what they were doing, or the way they were thinking or processing things as they were going through that unfortunate phase, then hardens their attitudes, and they become completely different people to who they would have been had they not gone through that experience. And then they start creating problems for other people they meet along the way, and they too, in fact, inflict more damage to themselves even.
Exactly. And I think, remember, you're transitioning from a child to a young adult and now to a parent at the same time. So navigating that space, and remember, you still have not understood who you are. And now you are given, you have this responsibility of now being a parent. So you are a parent, or you are a young person now parenting, and with no education, with no support, with no emotional intelligence to maneuver this. And can you imagine, as an adult, how do you now, if there's no intervention, if there's no counseling, if there's no therapy, if there's no support, it's a lot. It's a lot for you to now, and that's why I always advocate for people to get some kind of counseling, or not some kind of, to get counseling, because you've missed a big step of your life, life phases. And now you are a teacher, and you have to now adult, but there's a phase that you've missed, and that impacts on who you then become.
Back where we started, are these conversations taking place where it matters?
I think I would talk as HEAL SA right now, and I would say no. Looking at the numbers of calls that we get on a daily basis, and if I look at young girls that are dealing with the issue of teenage pregnancy, and most of them, they have not even spoken to their parents. And you're 5 months pregnant now, and you're now talking to one of our therapists and saying, do I run away? Do I abort? Do I leave the child in a dustbin somewhere? And just, so we are not having the conversation, we are not having the conversation, and the conversation needs to be had.
Are there models out there, or how do jurisdictions that are doing better than us in this tackle this issue?
I think for me, looking at other countries that have been successful in this is having the conversation all around everywhere. So you not only have it in the home, you have it in your community centers, you have it in schools, so in churches. So you sort of reiterate the message all throughout. So it's not only one person telling you that, this kind of behavior or this kind of act will get you that, but it's said in various forms. And that, for me, has been one of the, key success factor in terms of making sure that we get to the right space with teenage pregnancy.
Considering the fact that, children spend most of their time in school.
Yes.
Right. Or is our schooling system sort of equipped to deal with these issues? In other words, beyond churning numbers to say, this is the number of young girls who fell pregnant this year.
Okay, and I think for me, I work very close with schools and university, and one of the things that we get from teachers is that I'm not a social worker, I'm a teacher, and I haven't been trained to do this. So I think for me, as much as we can be so reliant on our education system or on schools, but we also have to be very mindful of the fact that we have teachers that have not been trained to have these kind of conversations. And
is an okay to be made for a remodeling, perhaps,
yes,
of our system?
Yes, I think that talks to that, and I think for me, I don't look at things in isolation. I think we can't just talk about teenage pregnancy without talking about HIV, without talking about STD, without talking about GBV, without talking about girls' empowerment. So all of these conversations cannot happen in isolation. We need to look at how we have this conversation not in isolation, but together, because they're all interrelated.
Mpadi Makgalo, thanks very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Valen has a look at the latest sports news in